Okay, let's imagine a big Indian family. This is me over here, and these are all my relatives. In Hindi, my mother's brother would be Maama, and his wife would be Mami. My father's sister would be Bua, and her husband would be Fufa. My husband's father or my father-in-law would be Sasur, and my mother-in-law would be Sas or Sasu. Okay, but wait, I'm a Tamil girl, and this does not apply to me whatsoever. In Tamil, my mother's brother would still be Mama, but his wife would be Atte. My father's sister would be Atte as well, and her husband would be Mama. My husband's father or my father-in-law would also be Mama, and his wife or my mother-in-law would be Atte. Three different people and three distinct relationships, but they all have the same name. This phenomenon is quite interesting because these characters need not necessarily be blood related. They're obviously not all the same person. They're different people with different relationships to me. What exactly is going on? Welcome to the strange world of Dravidian kinship, which is a system of family and relationships which is a lot older than even the very famously old Tamil language. And let me tell you, there are not a lot of things that are older than the Tamil language that have survived today. So it really speaks to how important and crucial this Dravidian kinship phenomenon is. Before we get into it, my name is Manimegalai and I make videos on Dravidian culture, history and linguistics. But since this is quite a multidimensional topic today, we're also going to be looking at a medical perspective of Dravidian kinship, as I'm also going to be joined by my good friend, Dr. Achuthan Sridharan. If you would like to see more on these niche topics, make sure to like, subscribe, and continue the discourse in the comments below. Dravidian kinship is a system that we use to classify our family members that is constructed around the very ancient South Asian practice of cross-cousin marriage. Let's take a look at this map. We can see here that the North Indian states, such as Uttar Pradesh, have a reasonably low level of cousin marriages at around 3%. But if we take a look at Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh, almost 1 in 4 marriages are between cousins. Now this is quite fascinating because family relationships are not merely cultural trends. They are systematic bedrocks that shape everything from our cultural practices, the language that we speak, the structure of our society, and even our own fundamental concepts of self and belonging in community. The fact that we can almost see a clear demarcation between the North and South Indian states in this regard means that this is a systematic and deep-rooted tradition. Kinship and family is the most intimate aspect of a human's life. So for this system to have survived thousands upon thousands of years and continue to influence us in such a substantial way means that this is not just a weird quirk, but an architectural blueprint of the social orders in the south of India. It's also to be noted that after studying this very pervasive system, anthropologists now use the word Dravidian kinship to refer to all practices of cross-cousin marriage across the world. For example, the people of the lowlands of South America are also said to follow Dravidian kinship, not because they were influenced by South Indians, but just because the academic name for this type of kinship all over the world is named after the South Indian variant. This just speaks to how iconic the Dravidian kinship system is. But what exactly makes the Dravidian kinship system so different to North Indians? First, let's take a look at the rules of the Dravidian kinship system by going back to our family tree. The first rule of Dravidian kinship is cross-cousin marriage. But what exactly is cross-cousin marriage? This is me, and this is my family tree. Here we can see my mother's brother and my mother's sister. Here, the children of my mother's sister are my parallel cousins. Parallel cousins are the children of the sibling who is the same sex as the parent. Similarly, my father's brother's children are also my parallel cousins, as they're the kids of the sibling who is the same sex as my father. So to summarize, my parallel cousins are my mother's sister's kids and my father's brother's kids. Now, what about my mother's brother or my father's sister? Well, the children of these uncles and aunts who are the opposite sex of my parents are my cross cousins. So the children of my paternal aunt and my maternal uncle will be my cross cousins. And according to Dravidian kinship rules, I'm not just allowed to, but I'm encouraged to marry them as well. But why cross cousins particularly? I actually read something quite interesting regarding this. In the 1997 paper by Celine Busby, we can look at the Mukkuvar fishing community of Kerala, where they also practice cross-cousin marriage. The paper finds that even among siblings, there's an inbuilt affinity among brothers separate from their sisters. So brothers are closer to one another, sisters are closer to one another. So from a young age, children view themselves as being closer to the siblings who are the same sex as them. This forms the foundation for why parallel cousin marriage is forbidden, because as a girl, my sister would be considered more of my immediate family than my brother, hence making it weird for me to marry my children to her children. But it's completely okay for my kids to marry my brother's kids because brothers and sisters are not considered close. So to summarize, according to the Dravidian kinship systems, parallel cousins can't marry, cross cousins definitely should marry. And interestingly, the parents of these cross cousins are always called Maama and Atte in Tamil. So my mother's brother and my mother's brother's wife, Maama and Atte. My father's sister and my father's sister's husband, Maama and Atte. Now, let's say I get married to my cross cousin, which means that my in-laws are my uncle and aunt. So I get to continue calling them Maama and Atte. Hence why this became the standard terminology for in-laws as well. Today, even if your partner is not related to you at all, we still refer to our in-laws as Maama and Atte just because of how deeply ingrained the Dravidian kinship system is in Dravidian languages themselves. We can see how this is a highly elegant system that is quite different to any socio-cultural structure we have seen anywhere in the world, but the obvious elephant in the room is the biological consequences. So let's see what my friend Dr. Achuthan has to say about this. So Dr. Achuthan, what kind of problems can we expect from the Dravidian kinship system?
We now know that the concept of Dravidian kinship and cousin marriage is age old, yet it is ubiquitous in our Dravidian culture. Now let's go to high school for a quick minute now and let's look at these P's. You might ask me, what do P's have anything to do with our discussion? Now, you might want to work with me for a minute. This shows us how parents can transfer certain traits to their offspring. This is true for some genetic factors, where the traits are called dominant and some are called recessive. These are carried genetically through alleles, creating genotypes, and this can be seen as phenotypes or apparent features. This is how each of us have a different eye color, different hair thickness, complexion. It's what makes each of us unique. Unfortunately, this also works for some diseases which are hereditary, and this can be inherited by dominant, recessive, or mitochondrial conditions. It could be related to certain chromosomes and so on and so forth. Coming back to the context of Dravidian kinship, in Dravidian culture there is the concept of marrying the Moramaman, who could be a maternal uncle or a male cross cousin. In the former case, it's going to be a second degree consanguinity, whereas in the latter it's a third degree case of consanguinity. In the former, two people getting married, they tend to share 25% of DNA, whereas in the latter, that number would be 12.5%. You might ask me, what difference is this percentage going to make when all human beings are similar? Now, all human beings share 99.6 to 99.9% of our genome, approximately. But these small numbers could make a huge difference, especially when it comes to a certain kind of conditions called autosomal recessive, and this has been documented time and again. Now there's something that is autosomal recessive. It's everywhere, it's all around us. The distribution of this condition across the world and even across India is something that I personally find baffling. Now it's lactose intolerance. Which of these is dominant and which of these is recessive? Let me know in the comments. And also, when the parents are related, the chances of a recessive trait surfacing in their child is high, and this has biological consequences.
So we've just had a look at the rules for the Dravidian kinship systems. So now let's look at two other kinds of kinship that are very important to understand so we can put all of this together into context. The Indo-Aryan kinship system is the second major form of kinship that is followed in India. So rule number one in the Indo-Aryan kinship system is what we call as sapinda. Here, the pinda part refers to the body or the physical matter of a person. This system aims to prevent marriage between people with substantial bodily or genetic closeness. The sapinda system mandates that any relative who is the child of anyone within 7 generations of your father's side and 5 generations of your mother's side should not be married. So if Suresh and Shalini are siblings, only after 7 generations can their descendants marry each other. This ensures that close relatives do not end up marrying. Caste Hindus also use gotra, which is a marker of patrilineal lineage or who your father's father's father, etc. is, to determine viable marriage alliances. Gotra is a family name that traces a caste Hindu's ancestry to a particular individual in early Indian history. People who you share a gotra with are considered to be, in a spiritual and biological sense, one large family. Therefore, marriage within the same gotra is strictly prohibited as a form of incest. This system is also based on the Brahminical concept of kanyadan, or the gift of a virgin, where a family will give a woman away as a gift in marriage, thereby removing her as a member of her birth family and adding her to her husband's family by marriage. So in summary, there are two rules in the Indo-Aryan kinship system. Do not marry your relatives within 7 generations of one another, and do not marry people within your gotra who are most likely a paternal relative of some sort. Another kinship system that caught my eye was one that they follow in Pakistan. So if we take a look at the map again, the only region in South Asia that practices more cousin marriage than the south of India is Pakistan. Now, according to the Quran, you are not allowed to marry relatives who are considered as mahram, or close relatives, such as your mother, sister, aunt, etc., etc. However, the Prophet Muhammad explicitly permits marriages between first cousins, which could be a reason for why cousin marriage is quite high in Pakistan. It's also to be noted that unlike the Dravidian kinship system that discriminates on the basis of the gender of your aunt and uncle, there are no such restrictions between marrying parallel cousins or cross cousins in the Islamic kinship system. How exactly did the Dravidian kinship system develop and spread, and how is it pretty much isolated in the south of India? A 1979 paper by Thomas Troutman from the University of Michigan proposes 2 theories to explain the divergence of the Dravidian kinship system, known as the tree model and the wave model. Now, given that the overarching Dravidian culture is based on both a genetic and linguistic reality, Troutman took an approach that addresses both these aspects. Firstly, Troutman suggests that similar to how modern Dravidian languages diverged from a single ancient ancestor, which we now refer to as Proto-Dravidian, the Dravidian kinship system is likely to have been a simpler practice in ancient India that later branched and mutated with individual nuances today. Second, Troutman suggests that Dravidian kinship system spread beyond just its core Dravidian uses and permeated the north of India and other populations through borrowing and contact. Here, the tree model is used to establish the deep genetic core, and the wave helps us understand the subsequent history of contact and hybridization that allowed for the spread of the system across India. However, in a paper by workwithmanimegalai Vaz, an opposing model that refutes the tree and wave models, known as the Big Bang model, was proposed. This Big Bang model, derived from studying the Hil Madhya Gond tribe of Chhattisgarh and Maharashtra, suggests that the early iterations of the Dravidian kinship system was not simple, but complex, compact, and symmetrical, from which various versions developed over time due to their unique socio-political and cultural circumstances. Okay, so I know all of this sounds quite confusing, but we'll revisit it in just a second, so keep these 2 theories in the back of your mind. So Thomas Troutman uses a very interesting example of Dravidian kinship, not in South India, but in Gujarat, to demonstrate his tree model. In the Mer community of Kathiawar, where they speak Gujarati, which is an Indo-Aryan language, we can see that despite being a border state and being subject to several cultural influences, they have retained their practice of Dravidian kinship, which is also seen in their language's semantic structure. So they use Gujarati words such as fui or Maama, but end up applying them in a Dravidian logic. Maama, which is a term reserved for mother's brother in Indo-Aryan languages, can be seen in the Mer community used to refer to father's sister's husband and spouse's father, just like how South Indians do. While this proves that kinship structures can persist long after languages are lost, it also supports Troutman's idea that we can roughly see a geographical demarcation of what parts of South Asia follow Indo-Aryan kinship and what parts follow Dravidian kinship, with a rough area of overlap that tends to have a mix of both cultural aspects that we know as the frontier zone. Okay, so this is my own opinion, so don't take this as fact, but I also believe that given that the Indus Valley civilization was situated where the Mer people of Kathiawar are, this may suggest that the Dravidian kinship system was perhaps as old as the earliest civilizations of India, and can possibly even suggest that those ancient civilizations could have been an early ancestor to modern-day Dravidian cultures and languages. So another reason for the spread, mutation, and condensation of the Dravidian kinship system could be a population's proximity to foreign cultural influences. So how isolated a community is or isn't from outside influences can be a big determinant of how they morph into new variants. So let's take a look at 3 examples of Dravidian communities that follow a version of Dravidian kinship to get a clearer understanding of what I mean. So number 1, we have the version of the Dravidian kinship system that is followed by most people of the Tamil community, which we will refer to in this video as Tamil non-Brahmin kinship, for the sake of simplicity. This system follows what we call as bilateral cross-cousin marriage, or the practice of marrying your cross-cousins on both your mother's and your father's side. Next, we have the kinship system followed by Tamil Brahmins who live in the same geographical location, speak the same language as the previous group, and also engage in cross-cousin marriage with a slight caveat. This group follows what we refer to as matrilateral cross-cousin marriage, meaning that men are only allowed to marry their cross-cousins on their mother's side and not their father's side. So while this group follows Dravidian kinship due to their cultural proximity to Indo-Aryan influences, they still follow the Gotra system that we learned about earlier. Just as a refresher, the Gotra system considers everyone who shares the same patrilineal ancestor as one big family who you're not allowed to marry from. Since everyone on your dad's side is the same Gotra as you, marriage with your paternal cross-cousin is strictly forbidden. Your mother's side, however, who has a different Gotra, is eligible for marriage. Here we can see that the Tamil Brahmin group doesn't exactly follow all of the Indo-Aryan kinship rules. They don't follow the Sapinda rule, but they still engage in the Gotra system. And as a result, this one-sided marriage phenomenon caused Tamil Brahmins to have slightly different terminology for their relatives. So your father's sister and her spouse go from Atta and Maama to Atta and Attimbir. Your mother's brother and his spouse go from Maama and Atta to Maama and Mami, as the same blood relationships no longer hold under the matrilateral Dravidian kinship system. Finally, we have the Hill Madia Gond people of the Gadchiroli district of Maharashtra. Now, this group of people are a tribal community who live in the forests of Maharashtra and speak a North Dravidian language called Gondi. Now, the Madia Gond people follow an interesting form of the Dravidian kinship system that's a bit different to the two previous groups mentioned. The Gond system follows the rule of patrilateral cross-cousin marriage, or the men of the family typically marrying their father's sister's daughter. At first glance, this may seem like the opposite version of the Tamil Brahmin system, but on a closer look, this gives us a window into what the original version of the Dravidian kinship could have been. In the Tamil group, your mother's brother's daughter is referred to as Maama Magal, and your father's sister's daughter is referred to as your Atta Magal or your Attachi. However, in the Madia Gond system, both these cousin sisters are just called Sango. This elegant and streamlined system does not differentiate between your mother's side or your father's side. They only care about whether or not they are marriageable. If you're a man, all Sangos are potential wives, and if you're a woman, all Sangis are your potential husbands. So if you're still allowed to marry from both sides, how is this different from the Tamil non-Brahmin group, you ask? Well, because if all female cousins are the same and all spouse pairs are cousins, then your father's sister's daughter and your mother's brother's daughter are the same person. So it doesn't really matter. Ruth Manimegalai Baz's paper, which posits the Big Bang theory of divergence, proposed that this highly complex, compact, and symmetrical system is probably the oldest and most archaic form of Dravidian kinship, given that the Madhya Gond people are an isolated indigenous community with very little foreign influences. Later Dravidian kinship systems likely mutated from this highly sophisticated system, forming their own distinct variants as discussed previously. So think of this as a huge solar system, with the Madhya Gond kinship system being in the center, with the Tamil Brahmin, the Tamil non-Brahmin, the Kerala Nayar, the Kerala Nambudri systems as planets that are in various rings of closeness to the center. The burning question here is why? Why is cross-cousin marriage a thing? I hate to let you all down, but there really isn't a clear answer. Some say that it improves spousal relationships. People sometimes believe that marrying within your own family can prevent frictions between in-laws, leading to a more cohesive and peaceful family life. In a 2007 paper by Doe and colleagues, they discuss how marrying within the family concentrates wealth within their own circle and also potentially lessens the burden of dowry from the girl's side. So the logic is that if you're related to the groom's side, they would demand less from you. Some say that it could be to preserve caste identities, or even just that it's just efficient, so you're saved from the stress of having to look outside for suitable partners, as marriage with your cross cousins is just an inevitability. It's an inevitability. But it's not just in South India. Even in the Mahabharata, the Dravidian kinship system was the norm, with even Krishna and Arjuna partaking in cross-cousin marriages. Even internationally, several early indigenous peoples of the world chose cross-cousin marriage as their preferred method of relationship and family building. Not entirely sure why. But beyond these culturally significant reasons, there's quite a substantial biological trade-off. So let's go back to Dr. Achuthan. How do these consequences actually manifest in practice?
So in South India, this is especially well documented with a condition that is called as thalassemia. It is a disease of the red blood cells. And the genetic mutation causes the cells to become fragile and unable to carry oxygen. And thereby they tend to meet their final fate a lot earlier in the spleen. Now, the body tries to overcompensate for the cell death by producing far more red blood cells in far more places than it normally would. And kids with this condition tend to require frequent, nearly fortnightly blood transfusions. And thanks to my rotation in pediatrics during my MBBS internship, where I was posted in the in the unit of pediatric hematology, I might lose my way in the hospital, but I can definitely find my way all the way back to the blood bank. And now, even in the thalassemias, there is something called a homozygous variant, which is said to be a lot more severe. And consanguinity is associated a lot more with that. And this might be my bias from spending time with the pediatric hematology unit, but I've seen kids suffer from a lot of hematological disorders like hereditary spherocytosis, glucose 6 phosphatase deficiency, which we call a G6PD because the name is really hard, diamond black fan anemia, and the clotting disorders like hemophilias, von Willebrand disease, and so on. I've also had the opportunity to read about quite a few genetic conditions and the diseases that could possibly have genetic context to them. Now, this isn't limited to hemophilias, or this isn't limited to conditions of blood. It's something that could affect many different organs. Like, for example, there could be cystic fibrosis in the lungs, hemochromatosis or Wilson's disease in the liver, polycystic kidney disease, and other conditions that have some genetic context to them. Some of these often require a lot of medical intervention or a lot of medical assistance. Some of these could involve more than one organ system, and some of these could even be fatal. Some of these could require, for a lot of help or a lot of substantial assistance to lead a regular life. So there is a lot of variation in terms of, like these conditions, where they can happen, what kind of assistance is required, the prognosis. It's highly variable, but what we need to know is that there is a genetic undertone or a genetic propensity to develop certain conditions, or to inherit certain conditions rather, and that's something we should be aware of. Now, there's something that I've heard in my second year of MBBS from an anesthesiologist, and this is very interesting to me because it shows how important demographics and things are. Like, for example, in some places like South Central Tamil Nadu or like Central Andhra Pradesh, it is relevant to ask and to know some demographic details about the patients. And this is probably why we tend to ask, about certain details like the address and, like the age and gender, because a lot of diseases are associated, with certain, like there is a chance of developing certain diseases for a certain age or a gender or a demographic thing. So what we're going to talk about is pseudocholinesterase deficiency. Now, there's a muscle relaxant that anesthetists use called succinylcholine. It's been replaced nowadays, but it is still commonly in use. It is used as part of general anesthesia to induce a state of paralysis so that nothing untoward happens on the operating table. And it is preferred for its rapid action. Usually it acts within seconds, and like any other chemical that enters the body, it has to act, it has to be broken down, and it has to be eliminated from the body. Succinylcholine by itself has a half-life of 4 to 6 minutes, and like I said, it has a rapid action, and it is metabolized rapidly by an enzyme called butyryl choline esterase. Otherwise, for the sake of convenience, we can call it pseudocholinesterase. It is a pseudocholinesterase enzyme in the humans. Now, what happens is some people genetically lack this butyryl cholinesterase or pseudocholinesterase, and because of this, the drug succinylcholine could stay in the bloodstream for hours and days, which could potentially cause respiratory paralysis, among many other possibilities. And if a patient has respiratory paralysis, then it means that they require ventilatory support and would require a lot more time to wean off the ventilator, and they would have to stay in the hospital for a longer time, which is problematic. Now, this pseudocholinesterase deficiency itself is pretty well documented, and it is thought of to be an autosomal recessive trait. And there's something that we have to discuss called founder effect. This is relevant to pseudocholinesterase deficiency, could be relevant to other conditions as well. Now, in some communities that practice long-term endogamy, There is a possibility that the population began with a small group of founders, and because of that, when like the endogamy is continued, it is possible for some rare mutations to become more common, and this is called the founder effect. Is it absolutely documented in case of this particular deficiency? Not really. Is it possible? Maybe. I'm not sure. But I think that, it would be relevant to talk about it in this context.
So, on a more personal note, Achuthan and I both grew up in South India, and I'm pretty sure other older South Indians would agree when I say this, but cross cousin marriage was not considered weird or incompatible with civil society at all. Most of us probably have close relatives who are in consanguineous marriages, which sometimes does impact the health conditions of the children born out of them. Achuthan, would you say you agree?
Absolutely. As native Tamil speakers, we've both grown up consuming media in many languages, but mostly Tamil. And there are so many songs and movies that celebrate the union of the Atta Paiyan and Maama Punnu, or the Akka Punnu and Mama, which seem perfectly fine, even romantic. But then this one time what happened is I watched a Pakistani drama where the hero falls in love with and marries his paternal uncle, that is his Chittapa's daughter. And quite frankly, that felt so wrong to me. And I don't think I'm alone in feeling this way. I think because of what I have consumed, the kind of media that I've consumed, I might even think that the latter, that is, in the case of the Pakistani drama, they are more likely to have kids with hereditary conditions than the other. But let's be honest, it doesn't make a difference. Cousins, regardless of whether it's parallel cousins or cross cousins, there's going to be a 12.5% similarity in terms of the DNA. And quite frankly, with an uncle, it's 25%, which is actually more. So the way I see it, it's really more about the perspective we have gained through our cultural lens than anything else.
And I think that's the ultimate takeaway. The Dravidian kinship system is one of the most ancient cultural forces of the south of India and has fundamentally shaped our identities, our family, our language, our stories, even our most innate human instincts. Truly understanding it means that we must appreciate its sophisticated cultural logic while also acknowledging the staggering biological realities associated with it today. In the end of the day, it is a part of our history that continuously informs our future. Thanks for tuning in today, and thank you to Dr. Achuthan Sridharan, who joined us for this multidisciplinary analysis. Please make sure to continue the conversation in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with people who you might think would enjoy this kind of in-depth academic content. And as always, Nandri, Vanakkam.